I'm so excited to talk to you. It's taken us a minute to get here.
I know. I feel like when we started talking about this, I had a completely different job. So yes, it
Yeah,
has been a
you
minute.
did. It has. It's so funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Sarah Anthony, who's been a guest on the show, I saw her recently. She's like, you should reach out to Mary again because she's got a new thing she's doing, and maybe this is a better time. And I was like, yeah, why not? So here we are. Thank you for finding the time. It's the end of the
Oh,
year when we're recording this. This will come out next year, but I'm so grateful to you for taking this hour to share a bit of you and your story with me and the listeners. So
I'm
thank
so
you.
happy to be here. Thank you for dealing with my schedule. That
No,
has been a giant pain.
it's this project, this podcast has been such a labor of love, but it's like I know how crazy busy producers are, so it's like
Yeah.
I'm a masochist, because I was like, oh yeah, let me try to talk to these insanely busy producers and people that like I respect and admire who are like crushing it. But that's why when I get to have your hour, I'm just so grateful. So with that said, I'd love for you to just take us to the beginning. I know that if we Google you, there's many articles that where you've already sort of talked about your path into finding that producing was something one could do for a living. So take
Mhm.
us to the beginning of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it originally just as a person who grew up loving movies and watching movies, I didn't really know what anybody did. I just you
Yeah.
kind of you knew like director, writer, and actor and things, so sort of the big ones. But
Yeah.
I kind of paid attention to producer names, but never really knew what that was. And even I think um, every day I'm learning about that. But, I
Yeah.
think kind of I just love movies. And um, when I had access to my first film set, which happened to be in high school, it was the Cider House Rules set that they were filming in Massachusetts.
Is that where you're from?
I grew up in Iowa originally, but then my
Okay.
family relocated to Northampton, Massachusetts in the
Mm-hmm.
middle of high school, which was not a fun time to move. But
Yeah.
and that was actually part of what led to this all, is I, was the new girl in school and didn't have any friends at first. And so when there was a new girl at my high school, I immediately befriended her, and she happened to be in town with her father, who was Oliver Stapleton, who's a cinematographer who was shooting the Cider House Rules. So that was my first like access to a
That's
set.
yeah, and that's crazy
Yeah.
that she obviously had to start school there because the production was going to be so long that the family had to just uproot and move there, right?
Which actually, it was that she decided, to come sort of take some time off school and just come to the US with her dad and go to
Mm.
school kind of for fun. So it wasn't a total
Oh,
relocation.
she was
Yeah.
going to school for fun.
She was just like, why not
Okay.
hang out in the States for a little bit?
Oh, nice.
Low stakes school. It might have been between, sort of, I think they have a different system there. So it might have been between kind of,
Mm.
her
Yeah, it
year.
makes
But
more sense. Yeah.
so going to set was fun, but the weirdly cooler part was seeing a production office, because that part of it, which is just a building with doors and people sitting at desks working, felt so crazy to me that that's part of what filmmaking was.
Yeah.
Which now, obviously, like I'm sitting in a production office right now, but at the time, I didn't think about all the stuff that happens offset.
Right, right.
Yeah. And so that was kind of my first sort of look at something that felt like, wait, there's all these jobs, and there's like the producer and the production office coordinator and the PA, and just anyway, so that was like my very, very first sort of, window into it,
Yeah.
which felt like it was possible,
Yeah, yeah.
But then kind of after that, going to college, studying film,
Where'd you go?
dabbling. I went to University of Wisconsin in Madison.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. Um, and there it's a lot of film theory studies
Mm.
and film criticism. And, again, I felt like, and we had to make movies. So I was really didn't feel comfortable writing scripts, and I didn't really feel comfortable working with actors. And so I made documentaries, and I loved that. And so when I came out to LA, I sort of stumbled into development, working at MGM and being, in development and assisting an executive there. And then eventually over to Columbia Pictures as an assistant, and then being on all those phone calls, kind of listening to the other end of the phone and all the producers that were calling my boss, and really wanting to be on that side and sort of wanting to get a little bit more in that window. And so that's sort of how I started gradually kind of moving over there.
Yeah, I read in one of the other interviews you did, you were talking about how the sort of how being an assistant was sort of your grad school, right? Because you get to be on the inside, sort of eavesdropping, fly on the wall with all these conversations of all types of levels. And I find in my own path that has been the most valuable lessons, that like you can't really be taught. You just have to be there in the circumstance in real time as it's happening to kind of to learn through osmosis and be a sponge. And so as someone who didn't go up the assistant path, like it seems like a lot of the people who successfully survived it and got out, that's really what they say, that's the most like the window into all of those conversations is what really prepares you for the real world.
Oh yeah. And I feel, I mean, I give so much, my boss at Columbia Pictures, Rachel O'Connor, is now still one of my closest friends. She was in my wedding, and I've always seen her as a mentor, and on multiple levels, right? Like, so on one hand, just being able to see how she does notes and how she talks to writers and how she talks to directors, how she, gets information from, an agent about something or whatever it is, like navigating all of that stuff, but also just having a voice and standing up for herself and being, especially a woman, being somebody who would be talking on the phone and somebody might try to interrupt them, or somebody might, and she just would keep talking and have her voice, and she was very steady and solid and confident. And that was something I learned, that was something I could see happen and learn and pick up on. And, because I think even for myself, like having those moments of, do I have a voice here? Do I have a seat at this table is always something to kind of, that I navigate, and having someone to look at and say, oh, wow, like that's how, that's how you do it with, confidence and class and all those things.
Do you feel like as you have climbed up in your career that you ever actually feel like you get a seat at the table? Or is there some part of, you know what I mean? Or is there always like a new table, like that's a little bigger or a different shape?
I will say, look, I do think the table keeps changing, but in my experience, has really been just as I realize what tables I want to sit at, if we're going to keep with this metaphor, the ones I'm choosing, I do feel like I have a place, and I feel really that there's a lot of trust there, and you can feel that difference. I think once you're sort of, for me, having that experience of saying no to something, or saying I don't think that's the right place for me, or I see why that might be interesting, but I don't know if that feels right, and just like that's been the hardest lessons, is saying no to things and how much you can kind of gain from that.
That's a good point that I know we're sort of skipping around, but I am curious. It's it takes such like tact, right? To know how to say no tastefully, and how to like know when something's a no for you. I guess. I'm curious if that's something that came easily for you, or if there was a period that you really struggled with that.
Yeah, no, it does not come easily. And it's a constant question and struggle. And sometimes, I will say, like, one of the things I've realized is, I'm grateful for all the jobs I didn't get, because they led to different opportunities. So sometimes it's being told no. I'm being told no. And I think that has been a good, almost like in some ways, they're both lessons, right? I think learning when something feels right, or doing something for the right reasons, and making a conscious choice. For me, that's been a big thing. And like knowing even if this leads to this or doesn't lead to that, I know that I've made the best decision I could in the moment,
Right.
And try not to look too far ahead, and try not to look too far behind either, and kind of just be okay with that.
I find that so tricky, because as producers, like innately, we are constantly looking forward and, always having to be in the present and so, or I'm sorry, in the future in some way, that I find that the ultimate challenge has, at least for me, been to then strike that balance of being in the present and enjoying the present, not just in all aspects of my life, but sometimes even with the work, where you can be so focused on the next thing that you're not really enjoying or participating on the thing that is happening today that took you 5 years to get to the today, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So I
I
don't know
know.
if, is that something that you've also.
Yeah, I think it's, well, it's hard. I think it's a balance. I know exactly what you're
Yeah.
talking about, because
Yeah.
sometimes I'm so caught up in the moment that I start to get anxious about, wait, what's tomorrow? You know, what, I need to look at the bigger picture sometimes because I
Yeah.
get hyper focused. But yeah, I do think that enjoying it is something, is a good reminder. I try to do that a lot, because I think it's easy to get caught up in it. And having a kid a few years ago, that changed things for me. Of every all the things that take me away, I want to feel really great about what, those reasons. And so
Yeah.
making, again, like those choices, saying no to certain things because it doesn't feel right, I think is really important. And
Yeah.
knowing that other things will happen.
Yeah.
So
It's just trusting in that, right? Like I know I'm a naturally very anxious person, which is what makes me really good at what I do. But like I said, is also the very thing that destroys me. And I, in my 20s, definitely struggled very much with that anxiety, because it's like, as an immigrant, as a person who's just like always had to be on that hustle, you just feel like you could never slow down. You feel like you could never take your foot off the gas, or how do you prioritize other areas of your life, like motherhood, or whatever it is, if you just want to travel, if you just want to, I don't know, whatever it is that you want to do, whatever that looks like for you, balance, right, in your life. And it's been an interesting journey now that I'm in my 30s to sort of like, feel a more like I've arrived a bit, so there's a little less anxiety, but there's always that thing of like, yeah, you did this, good for you, but the industry's like, what's next? What are you doing next? Like, and you're just like, oh my
yeah.
God, like.
At my college graduation, Jerry Zucker spoke,
Mm,
and because he was from Wisconsin, and he gave this speech about how he missed his college graduation because he was so just like going to Hollywood, like that was the destination. And in this speech, he talked about how, and I was sitting there like days away from driving to LA, so it was so just exactly what I needed to hear. But one of the things he said is that there is no there. And that has been something that has just stuck with me the whole time, because it's true. There is no there. There is no, like, the second you get there, there's another there, right? And so I think that reminder has been really, I mean, like I said, I think about it all the time, because, and even, I used to have friends who'd be like, where do you see yourself in 10 years? Or where do we want to be in 10 years in our career? And I'm like, I can't do that, because 10 years ago, I never would have thought I'd be here.
yeah.
So why even try to put that on it, or
Yeah.
put that pressure on it? Because it just feels like it takes away from the path, being open to a path that you might not know, I guess.
Right, right. And it's a path
Um,
so riddled with so much uncertainty that it's,
yeah,
yeah, I think it's, I admire people who can do those 10-year plans, 5-year plans, and actually execute them, because I don't, it's no one I know that I've even interviewed on the show has had any resemblance of a path like that. It's all been like doors
yeah.
open, they walked in the door, and then they look back and they built a career based on all these various doors that they could not have predicted would have opened for them. So,
Well, which, by the way, is producing, I think, in a nutshell too, because you
yeah.
you have this idea of, okay, we're going to sell this here, we're going to do this thing, we're going to get this person, they're available on this date, and we're going to shoot it here. I'm like, never works out that way. You're gonna, like, I don't believe we're shooting anything until, or anything is real until it's like done with post production. You know what I mean? Because there's
Right,
so many
right.
things that can just happen in the middle of it. So the
Yeah.
second you say something, it almost just jinxes it or something.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I
yeah,
agree. It's so true. Okay, but so you mentioned where you were 10
yeah,
years ago. So I don't know the timeline here. So after you were an assistant and then you
yeah,
connected with Seth Gordon, which
yep.
sounds like was really a pivot for you and sort of finding your footing as a producer. Was that about 10 years ago?
Yes, I think so. I have no sense of time right now. 2020 has been kind of a
Oh God,
wormhole of a year.
yeah.
Um, 10 years ago, yeah, I mean, that was about when I was, well, no, I'd been working with Seth for a few years then. So we'd done, you know, a couple movies together, and we're probably around the time where we started dipping our toe into TV in a big way. And it was kind of funny because, again, like, you know, today TV and film are so just, you know, one and the same in a lot of ways. But back when I started, it was, are you in film or are you in TV? And there wasn't a lot of crossover. And so when Seth and I started working on TV and, you know, really getting into that, that was around 10 years ago, when I remember going to dinner with a couple of my girlfriends, Jillian and, you know, Annie, who are both awesome producers now. And they, I remember being like, guys, I got to learn how to do TV. I got to figure this out. I need someone who's going to teach me how to do TV, because you just have to kind of jump in and figure it out. It was, that was probably about 10 years ago.
And so how did you do that? Because you obviously have produced docs, features, and television, and now, like you mentioned, it's a little easier to sort of cross lanes. I feel like I've been one of the fortunate producers who can kind of do all of the things. Sometimes I'll do just a commercial for good measure, because why not? I like the sprint of it. But back then it was so much harder, to your point. So how did you manage to stay in all those lanes and learn the television side so you could jump in the deep end of the pool?
I did what I think anybody should do if they don't know something, is go to somebody who knows something and ask them all the questions. And I did that. And I remember Teresa Kang, who was our agent at the time, was like, please tell me TV. And so we sat down and we talked about it all. And, you know, again, like, it seems kind of silly now to think about, but I really didn't, it was a different system. And how, you know, how do I do this? And what's the cycle of the pitch season? And, you know, when are upfronts and what are upfronts? Like, all the things that I think now are, you know, no big deal to know. But I think at the time, again, like, I was in such a feature world. And so, I talked to people and I asked questions, and I also just jumped in and tried to figure it out. So it was all in the same, you know?
Will you speak to how you personally navigate that? Because one of the questions I get a lot, it's we hear this like, oh, you just ask someone, you just reach out to people, right? But I think the act of reaching out tastefully, respectfully, when you don't know someone somewhere is really overlooked, in how to do that properly and not be like a weirdo, especially nowadays that everybody's so readily available on the internet. So I feel like 10 years ago was a lot harder to get contact info for some people, but anyone can Google someone and find their email address. So if you're cold calling, cold emailing, cold reaching out to someone because you want to learn, how would you recommend someone who is listening doing that so that they get the respect and time of day of the person receiving the message?
Look, I mean, I think it's being really genuine, and I think being, you know, again, sort of respectful. Those are the things I think, because I've received those emails. And for me, it's almost always about just, if I, in the moment, have the time to respond and remember, you know, then I almost always do. A lot of times I just forget and I'm busy, and then my email inbox is horrifying to some people. So, you know, I think, but I think just being understanding that you are taking someone's time. So I think just knowing that, working around their schedule if they're willing to have a conversation with you. I, you know, also think that if you can do your homework and know who that person is and what they've done, and also you kind of know what you're reaching for too, because sometimes talking to the president of a company may not be as, you know, it may not be as helpful as talking to the junior executive at the company. Right. And so I think just knowing who you're reaching out to and what you're asking of them is a first. Sort of do your homework before you reach out, I would say. And then I think be really just flexible and understanding with how long it might take to get on the phone. Like our scheduling, I might have taken about a year. So, you know, I think just knowing that stuff is really helpful. But for me, I love talking to people about, you know, one of the things, again, coming from, you know, the Midwest and not really knowing anybody, it was really helpful to just ask people, what is development? What does someone do? What is the path? You know, things that you just have to kind of navigate. Now there's a lot of information online and stuff, but you know, and when I first moved out here, I started this group called Hollywood Badgers because I wanted to, you know, help people from Wisconsin, where I went to school, you know, kind of navigate how to work in Hollywood. And I would go back there and talk to students and say, ask me whatever you want, and just, you know, kind of talk about it. Because again, it's hard to know what you don't know. And it's hard to kind of ask questions if you don't want to seem like you don't know. Right.
Well, we should definitely make sure we shared this episode with them if you haven't already shared your thing.
Yes.
I read somewhere that it was some book, one great book, I don't know, somebody who's really smarter than me said, you know, no matter what you do, never forget what it was like what your first time was like. Like, no matter what you do, don't forget that you two were the first person, that you two were the person at the table for the first time and you didn't know.
Yeah.
So like, but that quote is like, keep the excitement always for like being new to something, understanding you may not have all the answers, but also have kindness towards the people that are stepping in and it's their first time, because you two were there once and now you have all the info, but at one point you didn't, you know. And it's important to like just have that compassion towards others who are reaching out, and how scary it is sometimes to like email someone that you admire, whose work you've seen, and think, oh my gosh, like, and get so nervous. And so I think that's, what you said is exactly right. So, yeah.
Well, and I think I do. I mean, I think I remember that. Like I said, like I, you know my mentors and I still have them, you know, and I think it's important to remember that that's, I hope that never goes away, you know, because I think it's nice. It's nice to be able to reach out to somebody, say, and colleagues, and say, I'm going through this thing. Have you ever been through this thing? I don't know what to do here. And kind of, because, you know, every experience is different. Yeah. And there's always something new that comes up. And so, I definitely think that's nice. Yeah.
It's honestly part of why I wanted to start this show, is to create a sense of community in a place where maybe if I'm listening, I can't necessarily be talking to you, but I can, through this conversation, get some of the questions I have answered, or, you know, sort of be reminded that I'm not alone in this journey, no matter where I am on my path. Because I feel like that's such an important part of it that you don't really read about in the books, you know, the producing books and like making it in Hollywood books, is I think the mental health and the lifestyle stamina that is required to sustain a career in this business, regardless of what discipline you're in. But I would say, especially as a producer. So on that note, I'm curious, with the challenges of it, you know, especially certain creatives can be depleting of your energy. What do you do to recharge your soul and fill your personal well so that you can show up and be the best version of you to your collaborators?
That is a constantly evolving, changing thing that I have to always remind myself of. You know, I think it really does change. Like these past 7 months have been getting outside and exercising, you know, doing something that's just on my own, and preferably outside, you know, like running, which I never thought I would run, and this time has brought me to that. But, you know, before that, it was journaling. Sometimes it's just like holding my kid and, you know, just like being together for a little bit. You know, it really, but it is something I have to always remind myself of, because like these past couple of weeks have been really stressful at work. And therapy. I started doing therapy. That's a good one. I think that's a good one. Yes. Yeah. And my therapist is like, what are you doing to take care of yourself? And I said, nothing. And I think that's a really bad answer.
Yeah, it's a bad answer.
It's a bad answer because, you know, yes, because it's really, it's hard to say when you don't have a lot of time and it feels like there's not enough hours in the day. It's hard to say, well, I'm going to take an hour for myself, you know, when I feel like I need to be doing something else, or, you know, I'm not sleeping very well. I remember I went on a walk with the showrunner I'm working with right now, and I was like, oh, I finally slept for the first time last night. Well, I woke up at 1 and I read a script, but I slept other than that, you know, and it just is like, what is my now normal, like, okay, sleep is still waking up in the middle of the night and reading. But it's just, you know, finding just, I don't know, it's really hard. It's really hard. But I think I also do believe and remind myself that there's an up and down, like there will come a time. Right now, I've always known it's going to be really hard, but knowing that there will be times when it's a little more calm, and being kind to yourself is really good.
What's making it so hard right now?
Well, so I have been an independent producer for several years, and I mostly been doing this show called Atypical.
Yes, which I want to get to.
Yes. So we started the 4th season, which is our final season.
Congrats.
Thank you. We started the writer's room on March 16th, 2020, which was the first day of the stay-at-home order in California, which was a really rough day to start. But then a few months later, I started a new job with Priyanka Chopra. Yes. And I'm currently doing both as like full-time jobs. So production's supposed to start for Atypical in about a month. And so the combination of those two things are just a very intense.
Got it. Yeah, that makes absolute sense, which is also the perfect segue as head of TV and film for Pebble Pictures, which is Priyanka's company. Yeah. How has that transition been like for you to go from freelance independent and now being within a company? And also, what is that job responsibility? Like, how is that different from what you've done so far?
Well, it's, the transition. Well, so before independently producing, I was with Seth Gordon for about 10 years. And so that transition to independent producing was actually very drastic, because it was like very, very intense and busy and big, to I want to be quiet and do and by quiet, I mean, you're producing a TV show is it's still intense, but it was fewer things, and kind of less responsibility on the whole. And so then the transitioning to Priyanka and working with her was ramping up a lot very quickly. And so, but I felt ready for it, because again, I'd had kind of a few years of, again, not quiet. I was producing a show, but it still felt, less crazy. And I felt really ready for something new. And I'd been feeling that a little bit for about a year, and kind of, again, back to that picking the tables that you want to be at. She, when I met with her, it just was like, oh yeah, this feels right. This feels like the kind of, person, the kind of company, the kind of vision that I want to be a part of. And, so the responsibilities are, it's a lot, we have TV, we have film, where, we want to do doc series and everything and in between, and really kind of getting those projects developed, sold, and then into production at some point, hopefully. And, high volume. And so,
so would you say, because it's still a pretty small company, so in terms of the support that you have, are you also essentially development then? Everything that comes through the pipeline, I would assume, goes through you, and you're vetting it before you bring it to Priyanka to discuss. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Yes.
No wonder you're reading scripts at 1 a.m. Makes sense.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. But that's, again, I love it, right? I love, working with somebody who I really respect and admire and trust, and have, I feel that security, and sort of knowing we are aligned in so many ways that it feels like, hey, I want to talk to you about this thing. And also the other thing is, I love that she's somebody who loves to read content and has, thoughts on it and watches stuff. And so it's just easy in some ways, to have those conversations and to feel like we're on the right path, and make decisions. And, we're also, the sort of culture of how we work is very aligned, right? So coming from the independent producing world, where I got to sit at home on my couch and work and, do it on my own schedule, is not that different, right? As long as you're getting the work done, do it how you feel comfortable doing it. So if it's sitting on the floor, you're sitting on the floor doing it. It's not corporate feeling at all, which is, so in that sense, it was very easy to transition, because it was the same sort of culture in general.
Yeah, the same company
Yeah.
culture you had for your
Yeah.
company of
For
one.
myself.
For yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
I think as someone who's always been very curious about going in house and working, and going in house just sounds like, what does that even mean anymore? Because like in house means I'm
Right.
still in my own house, right? Especially
Yeah,
with
I
this work
know.
from home thing. But like, I've been freelancing for so long on the indie grind for so
Yeah.
long that I'm always so curious on that transition. And a lot of my fellow cohorts who came up with me, a lot of them are in that place where they are transitioning and going in house and like going to Netflix, going whatever, and it's just so fascinating to me, the differences, and whether you're going to a much bigger player like those guys, or you are running a smaller company, talent, sort of talent led company, the differences of it. I had the good fortune of speaking with Michelle Purple. I don't know if you know her, but she's Jessica Biel's producing partner. And one
Yeah.
of the things we talked a lot about is, at the time when Jessica Biel launched her company, which was, I think it was over 10 years ago, I forget, but it was at a time when the industry really looked down upon actor production companies, because
Mm.
everybody thought that it was like a vanity company.
Vanity. Hmm.
And it's just so interesting how, I think, thanks to, women like Reese Witherspoon, who really put their money where their mouth is with like getting female-led content out there, and amplifying female voices. I feel like in the past 5 years, there's been this like incredible sort of uprising of all these women who, yes, are famous actresses who people recognize, but that actually are getting to put on this producer hat and like actually make a dent in the conversation, right? Because I think at the end of the day, we tell stories. We're so lucky to get to do what we do, but stories impact change. They change how we perceive culture and others. And it's such an important social responsibility, I think, to get to be a storyteller. And so to have women popping up all over from all kinds of backgrounds, getting to have this opportunity, I don't know. It's not even really a question. It's just such an exciting time, a pandemic aside, it really is. What a wonderful time to be a woman and to be in this business. And it just makes me really inspired, just like even chatting with you,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I completely feel the same way. And again, like, I think it's, you know, would 10 years ago, if I ever thought I would be
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
the answer would be absolutely no. And even when we were starting conversations, I didn't know much about, who she was as a person, and so I think that, like, really trusting your, like, those feelings and those connections, and how, again, like, at the end of the day, we're all people who want to tell stories. Right.
Yeah.
And I think, with her in particular, once many people know this, but if you start looking, she's been producing for forever, and so
Yeah.
I think that having that really strong point of view and drive and all of the things that I align with has been really great. And it's so funny because I think sometimes I remember, like, probably, I have no sense of time, over a year and a half ago, going on a job interview that I was really interested in the company. Maybe this could be cool, again, like, not really sure what I wanted to do. And I remember sitting in the waiting room lobby of this office building and having a total panic attack and being like, I can't work in an office. Like, I can't do it, and I think and being like, this isn't the right place for me. And I think, like, knowing that too, what feels right and what feels good. And even though on paper it might've been
Yeah.
a great job, who knows? You have to trust your gut
I know.
too.
And it's that thing, like your gut is always speaking to you, but some people it just takes them a little longer to start to listen and, trust that's guiding you to the right place. It's like just trusting this invisible force that you have to say no to the right, no to the certain things for the right things to appear for you.
Yeah.
And I think that's honestly why there's a lot of sort of unhappy people in our business, is because they sort of know they shouldn't be doing X and they sort of force it. And I get, like, sometimes you have to pay your dues. You have to be
Sure.
you have to work a desk like for a certain amount of time. But the people that are not a part of my circle that I've encountered that are just perpetually unhappy, it's the people, from what I've gleaned in conversations with them, like they are just constantly going against their own gut. And it's such a weird, and it's such a weird business in that sense. Cause like you said, there is no one path, there is no one way. So really all you have is like your gut, your sense of integrity and your inner compass to like align with people who sort of vibrate at that frequency as well, who are going to give you the right advice to sort of get where you're going, you know?
Well, I had one of my very best friends who is now directing, 15 years ago, we would do dinners together as assistants and just say, am I happy right now? Am I happy with what I'm doing right now? Because yes, I'm still an assistant and my coworkers are getting that jump to CE and they're getting that promotion or they're getting that thing or, but do I really want that? And if so, I should go for it. But am I happy right now? Am I learning something? Am I getting something from this opportunity right now? And if not, make a change, right? And I think that like check-in is something that has helped me a lot because it's easy to get swept up in the wait, I'm still here. I'm still only here, right?
Yeah.
But am I getting something from this that's different than the last thing I did? Or, sometimes it's credit, sometimes it's experience, sometimes it's whatever. I don't know. Like it's always a little bit different. And so, I mean, for me, that's what I have to keep doing, and there was a time when I realized, somebody was asking me over Christmas years ago about like, work question. I was like, I don't want to talk about work. And then I was like, why? I love what I do, but am I happy in the thing that I'm doing right now? And so, like just having to kind of check yourself, I think is really important because it's easy to get wrapped up in it. I still do it all the time,
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, when you do get wrapped up in it, what are your ways of like navigating out of it? Asking for a friend, I'm the friend.
I'm a friend of a friend. I mean, look, it just depends on the thing, right? It's like, I try to just be, when I have a tough situation, just trying to talk about it, get real with it, whatever it is, figure it out, navigate it. Or if it's something that's really bad, then get out of it.
Yeah.
I think change it. It's been a while since I've had that sort of thing, fortunately. So it's, been pretty good, but yeah, I mean, look, I think the other thing is, there's always navigating people and personalities and unhappy people, in life and in this industry. And I think being really conscious about who you work with, if you can, is really important.
Yeah.
So
what brings you joy? What makes you happy? Besides work?
It's honestly the little things. It's really, it's time with my kid and really, having that family time, and quiet and alone, time. It's a weird year because I think, for me, I feel like part of my superpower of this quarantine is that I am an introvert. And so I've been kind of okay, like there's a lot of stuff going on, but happiness, there's just a good
it's
meal.
interesting because what I've observed, and I've been fortunate enough to do a lot of these conversations during the pandemic, right? All the way up to when it kind of started. And it's definitely for us who have the privilege of having a roof over our heads and having, a safety net financially and still having a job, like it's really created space, I think, to reevaluate like what is important, what are our priorities in terms of how we're filling our lives, but also the kind of work that we're doing, the kind of people we're surrounding ourselves with. I feel like this big energetic shift. And that's why there's been, I feel like so many, even within agencies and managers and just so many people like leaving the business and just really being like, whoa, like, is this what I want to be doing? Is this the thing that brings me happiness? And so I was just curious if the pandemic or how the pandemic has perhaps shifted or just solidified any of that for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has, because in the sense that I remember feeling in the beginning of the pandemic, where we didn't have childcare and, was still working. First of all, juggling those things was hard. But I felt like, when would I ever have had this much time with my daughter? Because I work a lot. And
Yeah.
so I would see her. There were times when I would see her for an hour in the morning and maybe an hour at night,
Yeah.
There were times when I would only see her once, because I would be home too late, and so that, and now kind of starting to get more busy and being away more. And, like today I was leaving before she woke up, and I was like, I want to get home in time to
Yeah.
see her, and just again, like, I feel more than ever that pull, um,
Mm.
and that prioritizing, because when I had her, I didn't know how to be a mom. I didn't know how to be a parent. And it was really hard. And I didn't feel like I was good at it. And I didn't know what I was doing. And so it was easy to kind of go back to work. Of course, it was hard in the sense of like, I wanted to be around, but I know how to do my job. Right. And
Right.
I know how to produce. It was like, oh, yes, let's have somebody help me with this thing called raising a child. I don't know what to do there. And now, now I feel more confident in it. I feel like I'm learning and figuring it out, and, like producing, asking other people how they
Yeah.
do it. But, I think so. Yeah, that balance is something I want to keep, or try to keep, as best I
Yeah.
can. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, it's
I don't
tricky
know.
as a woman who aspires to have a family, and I don't currently have one. I feel very much, just hearing you talk, that's definitely always like the anxiety of like, oh my God, like how do you structure your life to create that sense of balance so you can be with your child and actually be there to see it grow up and help raise the baby that you created. And so it's not just another one of your producing projects you're juggling among
Well,
everything
yeah,
else you're doing.
but
Yeah.
also being a producer who, recognizes that that's something. Here's one thing I will say about the pandemic, and I don't know if you've felt this on your end at
Mm.
all, but um, the fact that people do have families has become part of our work now,
Yeah.
because you'll be in a meeting and somebody's will be like, I gotta go deal with my kid right now, or my kid will jump on my lap when I'm in the middle of a Zoom, or I have to leave because she has to go to the bathroom, whatever. Like, and I was seeing that happen on the other end of my meetings too. And I think there was this sort of like, oh yeah, people have kids, we know about that, but as long as it doesn't interfere with work. But now that people were home, it was suddenly like, no, you can't avoid that. And so there is a little bit of, at least on my end, where I felt like, oh yeah, you get it now, right? Like,
Yeah.
there is this sort of thing. You can't just hide your kids away in a closet. And I think being someone at work who recognizes that people have families is
Yeah.
important too. Even with one of our, my friends who is a director, she's going back to work. She did a baby going back to work.
Mm.
You should tell people that you need XYZ because of that, and I think
Yeah.
it's like, it's okay to ask for that. It's okay
Yeah.
to do that. And you should, because, I would fight for you to have that,
Yeah. Yeah.
on
Yeah.
my,
I'm
anyway.
I'm optimistic that the one of the upsides of the pandemic, and like exactly what you're saying, people getting to really remove that veil of like the work and the life. It's like, no, you're gonna, for this year you have to have it all in one place. It
Yeah.
helps remind us, oh right, like I'm not a robot, or right, like we're all humans and we have lives outside of like an office, and really hopefully help make that shift of how do we incorporate our families into our work, and it isn't so separate. Like I know exactly, like with production, for example, that's been such a conversation of like, why is it that sets can't offer childcare for crew who works, these crazy hours, and have some type of trailer or moho where you just drop off your kid and you can still see your kid at lunch if you want to,
Mm-hmm.
and really find ways creatively to incorporate that. Because I think if there's any industry that can like figure that out more quickly than others, it's ours, because we're constantly
Yeah.
problem solving and finding solutions for things. And
Yeah.
so I really hope that becomes like a priority for everybody when we have to go back and people are like, no, but I miss this. I miss actually seeing my kid more than like twice a day for a couple of hours.
Yeah.
So I hope that can happen. At least that's what I feel optimistic about and selfishly want that to happen so that I can be a part of that, when I have a family as well.
Yeah,
So,
I hope so too. I mean, I think and I do believe it's possible. And I
yeah.
think again, it's sort of, I remember when I first had her, going into the writer's room and having to leave or go do something, being very public about pumping.
Mm,
Um, and, because I was thinking about it, I'm like, okay, I'm saying this in front of a lot of people who don't have kids or who don't, don't have that or aren't used to that. And I was kind of doing it consciously because I wanted, on the next one for them to not think that was weird or to,
yeah.
feel like that was, oh, should go, take an hour to go do that. Like I don't know, it just familiarizing it and making it part of it. It's like, it's hard because I didn't exactly always have that mirrored for me when I was an assistant,
Right.
and so making assistants feel like, my assistant had 2 kids and, so it was just, it's okay that you have to take your kids somewhere. Like that's okay to
Yeah.
say and to, and I'm sure that there's things beyond just family. Like I'm obviously focused on that because I have a daughter, but I think
Yeah.
that there are other things that are just, that should be more part of it all because we are all dealing with a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mental
Exactly.
health, just again, like that, I think is
Yes.
something that's come
So yeah,
forward.
so important. I really hope that it can create a little bit, I don't know, just like a healthier industry with people that are more
Yeah.
compassionate. We were able to sort of like, it's almost like there was a wedge placed in the hamster wheel and we all just like fell off and we're all like trying to
Yeah.
figure out that we don't have to get back on at that speed to still be as productive.
Yeah.
I saw this video talking about this guy who used to do this bike ride, and every time he did this bike ride he was only able to do it in 43 minutes and he can never get his time down. And then one day he did it and he thought, oh, for sure, like I added 10 minutes to this bike ride that usually is 43 minutes. He thought it was going to be like an hour. And all he did was like, he stopped, he looked at the birds, he appreciated the ride actually, instead of just pedaling to get where he was going. And when he looked at his stopwatch, it only took an extra 2 minutes to actually
Mm-hmm.
stop and enjoy the ride. And he was like, and that for me has changed the way I do everything, because
Mm-hmm.
you are still going to get where you're going. But can you just take an extra couple minutes to
And enjoy
enjoy
it.
where you're going? And I find that for
Yeah.
a lot of people in our business, like producers especially, we are sort of fast-paced individuals, and like you can slow down and do it in half of your speed and it'll still be faster than most people, and enjoy
Yeah.
what you're doing. And that is a constant reminder for me because I can easily be,
Well, and it's
yeah,
the same thing as carving out some time for self-care, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah, yeah.
that you may think you're losing an hour, but you're actually gaining however much more productivity
That's
or,
right.
groundedness, whatever that is. And
That's
you
right.
think that is, yeah, that's a constant. I think the other thing is just how productive we can be in a short amount of time and,
Yeah.
things like that,
Yeah.
that,
Yeah. Which is why, like, a side note, sort of tangent, but like, I get
yeah.
kind of frustrated when people want to shortchange a producer salary or a producer's fee,
Mhm.
because it's like, well, you're not paying me for quantifiable hours. You're paying me for the years of experience that allow me to do
Mhm.
this one thing in 30 minutes that could have taken me 3 months. And
Yeah.
that it's such an interesting, it's hard to explain to people, especially as you're coming up and having to, as women, like fight for your worth and be like, this is why I can't work for this weekly rate and all of that nonsense. But
Completely.
ugh,
Yeah,
yeah.
completely.
But I want to be mindful. We're at 50
Oh, no, it's okay.
minutes.
Yeah.
And so I want to shift gears to talking about autism in love and atypical, and our sort of
Sure.
link to autism that we both have, which is awesome. And I think that's actually why Sarah connected us. We met
Yeah.
through the doc space, and she was a big fan and supporter of autism in love. And
Love it.
obviously, atypical, now in its fourth season, you said, right? Fourth or fifth?
Yes. Fourth.
Fourth. Yeah.
Fourth and final. Hmm.
Fourth and final. And so talk to me about that journey. Like, how much did you know about autism before this project came into your world?
Very little. I mean, very little consciously, I would say. I think once I really, season one, really, we did and we've continued throughout, but sort of doing a deep dive in research and just reading and understanding. And I think the interesting thing with my experience with autism and meeting people with autism and recognizing that I know people with autism, you know, maybe I didn't know had it, and, you know, things like, I think it's just been, it's one of those wonderful communities to become a part of in so many different ways. And really that, you know, they say that when you meet someone with autism, you've met someone with autism, you know, and I think that is really true. And to my experience, and everybody is their own unique person who has, you know, different ends of the spectrum. And I think it's just been like a constant learning experience, you know, an evolution over time.
And so how would you say, oh gosh, I mean, yeah, like before I did Autism in Love, I actually knew nothing about autism. I had no contact with it. I didn't have a family member who was impacted by autism. I was very ignorant, honestly, about it. I thought I didn't know how it was different from Down syndrome, like most people. And Autism in Love was almost 10 years ago. So it was also quite a different time.
Yeah.
It was really just like vaccines and Jenny McCarthy. It was like, those were the buzzwords, you know, and we really set out to do a project that looked at what happens to these kids when they grow up and become adults and want to have these romantic relationships. And what does that look like, you know, for them? And by definition, people on the spectrum don't know how to connect or read social cues. So how do you navigate a romantic relationship if you can't like see that your partner is upset because you said something? So it was just really fascinating and honestly a very serendipitous, life-changing project for me. Like it's the project that professionally changed everything, opened a lot of doors. You know, we premiered, for me, it was like the catapult to that next level. We premiered at Tribeca and we went on to become Emmy nominated. And it's still a project that till this day, we get people emailing us and thanking us for making it. But the bravery of the subjects that participated to open up their hearts and their homes, to have us put a camera in their homes, which is like hard for most people to do, especially with someone on the spectrum. They're very sensitive to all of that. We just are so grateful that we got to be there and document these important moments that happen in their lives. Because that's the thing with docs, right? You don't have a production end date on someone's life. You just have to like eventually stop rolling the cameras. Yeah. And I feel like we got very lucky with what we were able to capture when we captured it. But yeah, I mean, it changed everything. It just taught me so much about love and what love can look like, you know, and how, like you said, you met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. And similarly, every relationship is unique, whether neurotypical or atypical. Everybody's got different ways of navigating what they go through. And so being a part of that, and honestly, like after the film, every time we had a screening, having parents and people on the spectrum come up to us and shake our hand. I remember one time it was a father who, he was a grown-ass man, you know, and he came up to me and was crying and shook my hand. He's like, you have given me hope that my son can one day maybe have a relationship. And I didn't think that was possible. And that's the why, you know, the why I do what I do. For those moments and those experiences that are so special when you really get to see that your work has impacted someone on a really deep, real level. And you can't force that. You can't, you know, force that into existence. It either happens or it happens. And
yeah, I think that's been my experience too, especially as the seasons have gone on and we've been able to, you know, season one, nobody knew what the show was, right? And so so you're making this thing in this bubble and trying your best and reaching out. We have consultants and we have people within the community who've been a part of this show since the beginning. But season two really opened up a lot more opportunities to connect. And so when people, you know, finding more actors who are on the spectrum and finding people who then could be on the show and be, you know, see, not only have people reach out and say, I identify with Sam, but also other characters within the show who, you know, who are on the spectrum who want to fulfill their dream of being an actor, you know? And so it's kind of having all of those really cool opportunities kind of unfold over the years has been, it's amazing. And the parents reaching out and connecting with parents has been really nice too.
Well, so now that it's its final season, what would you say, like, what's the thing you're going to miss the most about the show?
It's such a special show. I mean, I think the group that has worked on this from the beginning, it feels very, although a lot things have changed throughout the years, people have come and gone. It's still very much a family, and that family keeps growing. And I think I'll miss, you know, talking to everybody and
Yeah.
sharing everything. I mean, it's going to be hard this year because we can't all hug each other
Yeah.
when we see each other. But I think that's what it is. It's like very much a family, but also one that works really well together, cares a lot about each other, has we've always tried to do better every year, and we can always do better, but it is something where we try to make a conscious effort to. And I think that
Yeah.
having that working on a show that means something
Mm.
is pretty nice.
Yeah.
um, so
Yes.
I like
Yeah.
that a lot. Yeah, I'll miss that for sure.
Good. Well, I
Yeah.
have one final question for you. I won't ask you where you'll be in 10 years, but if there's a legacy that you hope to leave behind, what would you say that is?
That's a good question. I feel like I need to do some journaling and walking on that one. But I think, look, what I would love, I mean, I care a lot about the things that I work on. I'm very proud of the things that I work on. But more importantly, I really care about my relationships with people, and I care about doing a really good job and doing that as a good person. And I think, I want to be someone who people love working with, because the experience of it is way more important than what it is, in my opinion. Because again, like, and maybe I'm sure there are people who will disagree with that. And I hope someday to, get the award for the thing that matters more than my relationships, but I don't think that'll happen. I think ultimately it's going to be about the journey and the experience and the people, and that is really important to me.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's my legacy, but it's
I,
it's it's just like trying to be somebody who people like working with. I would love
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Hey, I think that's my MO. I harp on the show about that. People are
Yeah.
probably tired of hearing me talk about it, but I won't ever stop talking about it. That for me, it's the thing itself is not as important as the journey to get to the
Yeah.
thing. And who you're going to be during that journey is really all you have, because there's no way to control. Like you said, anything can go wrong at any point in the process, and there's best intentions. And so, yes, the thing could go on to be the one thing that gives you all the accolades or not. But if you don't enjoy the path to get there, then is that a life worth living? Right?
Yeah. Well, for sure. And I think also, it's like being able to watch something again that you've worked on and smile because that experience was really good, because
Yeah.
that isn't always the case. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel like that is like, feeling really proud of the thing you make for sure, but also feeling really proud of like that memory of the thing.
Yeah.
That's important to me as a person, again, like, is choosing to spend time on something that,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
where you want to be. So yeah.
No, I think we're cut from the same cloth. So
Yes.
very much
Well, let's
so.
do something together
I would
then.
love that. I would love
Yes.
that. Well, thank you
Yes.
so much
Thank
I'm so
you.
grateful. It's took a year, but you're worth waiting for.
Oh my gosh.
No, it's always worth it. It's like I said, I
Yes.
admire you, and I applaud
Um,
you and everything you're doing. And so I feel really grateful to get to
like
have this hour with you. So
Likewise. Thank you. This was really, again, like a really fun way to spend time. So thank you for
yeah,
having me. Really
thank
appreciate it.
you.